everyone is on a journey. So how can we create an environment where we can normalize that we're human beings, not human doings. We are human beings, and give each other grace and create an environment where people are not scared, frightened. So many people are living in fear, and that is not a condition even for them to flourish.
Welcome to Safe Space Made Simple, a practical podcast that guides clinical leaders and healthcare managers to create trust and support with their teams. I'm your host, Trace Hobson. Join me for weekly interviews, practical tools, and inspiring transformational stories of bringing people together in healthcare. Now, let's dive in. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Safe Space Made Simple. My name is Trace Hobson. I'm your host. And today we have Betty Mutwiri, who is a leadership coach, executive consultant, as well as an author and speaker on leadership development in healthcare, as well as EDI. In today's show, Betty shares why it is that she believes that systemic team coaching can change the world of healthcare for clinical leaders, managers, and teams. And she also shares actionable tips on how you as a manager, a leader, or an executive can implement that into your team today. So without further ado, let's get right into the show. Hi, Betty. So, Betty, thank you so much for being on the podcast with me. And I'm really excited to talk to you because when I first met you and heard your story and also some of the work that you do, you captured my imagination with a statement that said, I think that team coaching can change the world. And that really captured me because at the time, obviously, I was in my own graduate studies around and in a class on team coaching. So it was relevant, but I had never heard anybody speak so boldly about that. And so this is why I wanted to have a conversation with you. But to begin with, if you could just share with our audience a little bit about who you are and the kind of work that you do, that would be a great place to start.
Thank you so much, Trace, and thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm truly honored. My name is Betty. I'm the CEO and founder of BM Leadership and Coaching Consulting. It is a boutique firm that works and partners with leaders across the country and beyond to help them thrive in today's dynamic and complex environment. I do tons of executive and leadership coaching, leadership development, and facilitation, leadership program development. I love creating frameworks for coaching. I'm an EDI strategist and a speaker and author and a mother and wife.
Just to add that in there, a mother as well. So
I should have started with that, but that is my best job description. It should be first.
Right. That's probably what's prepares you more than anything else to do the work that you are doing. I know that's been my case.
Yes, absolutely.
So going back to what I heard you say about changing the world, let's hone in on the one sector that I think that I know that you have done a lot of work in, and changing the world of healthcare. And I'm curious, what are your perspectives on coaching and team coaching and how we might be able to address some of the big challenges that are going on in healthcare today?
Yes, I love that sector. I was a director in organization development and also patient and family-centered care in Saskatoon Health Region. And in my tenure there, I really loved the impact. I think it's the work is so sacred. You could be working in there, but you could also be a client. We are all clients of the system, even if we work in that system. And in my tenure there, I really did come to appreciate that teams are the core unit for change. Leadership is a social process. So leaders indeed need to keep the momentum for change, but it's indeed the teams that make the magic happen. So that's why I'm so passionate about team coaching, because when you can ignite the passion, when all the team members are aligned in the same direction and they know who they serve. And the framework of systemic team coaching for me resonates deeply because we start the first one in commissioning. We think about what our stakeholders would say. We think about the value that we bring. So keeping that front and center, what value am I bringing? How am I showing up? And as a team, how do we synergize, to
Mm,
create that value for who we serve? That's why I was bold in my statement that I do believe systemic coaching is the best catalytic development opportunity for teams in healthcare and other teams in all industries.
mm. So when you describe systemic team coaching, give the listeners a bit of an idea of what that would look like on the ground. And in other words, for a clinical leader, a patient care coordinator or a nurse educator, a manager that's managing a unit, and they had you come in to do some systemic team coaching with them, what would that be like and what would they see and hear?
I love that. I love that. I used to lead a team of OD consultants, and we would call it team effectiveness.
Mm,
So what would happen was if the team is going through some challenges, as teams always do, because they are a social system, that is not anything really to be embarrassed about. Social systems always have points of friction. We would go to a team and start to ask about, what is the nature of the issue that is, I guess, causing interruption, or if it is a strategic planning, where they would like to go. So the systemic team coaching way of engaging would really start by examining, who they serve. So as a director of patient and family centered care, I had, the reports that would come to my desk. I knew what was going on in terms of safety incidents. And that is where we would start so that they can really be honed in, rise above the interpersonal friction to the cause and to the purpose, the shared purpose they have on the team. So
mm,
I always found out that when there's a conflict, when you deal at the level of person to person without really engaging their purpose, engaging why they're there in the first place and what they are there to fulfill, achieve, serve, it becomes kind of an interpersonal struggle. Once you bring in the other perspectives, I think it elevates the conversation, it elevates the conflict. And in most cases, we found that they could be actually wanting the same thing, but people are going about it in different ways,
mhm,
and that's almost always the case. So that would maybe catalyze the process for resolution, bringing in diverse voices, ensuring that we may want to solve this conflict, but it's greater than just the two of you. It's greater
mhm,
than just the three of you. There's a higher purpose why we are doing this. And
mm,
I love the other concept around, really clarifying with, creating good structures and processes for, how they manage their their roles and interpersonal relationships and what have you, in creating really sound team charters. And within all of that is the learning. Today, in today's environment, we just need to be learners all the time.
mm,
Every day is a learning opportunity. And how do we establish the learning philosophy at the center of it? So then they have the psychological safety, as you know, that is a huge issue. How do people feel free to, share their experiences,
mhm,
share any ideas they have without any fear of
mhm,
repercussion? So that's why I particularly love that model, is
mhm.
because it elevates the conversation beyond the individuals to see the big perspective.
Right. So you brought up psychological health and safety, and I think that that's a relevant place to go for us in this part of the conversation. And one of the things that I work on is the idea of team charters as it relates to a safe space. And so that's a psychologically healthy and safe space, or what I call top-down safety. But then there's also
Mhm.
this neurobiological safety that wants to happen as well in healthcare. I think that's a bottom-up safety. And
Mhm.
this is directly correlated with some of the big problems we've got in healthcare culture or team culture today, with um, there being a reactiveness, disrespectful conduct, bullying, harassment, discrimination, discriminatory harassment. And my hypothesis is that much of that is because of the dysregulation that's going on inside of people's systems, their individual systems, and them not even maybe being aware of that, or not having the skill to be able to navigate that. So I'm
Mhm.
curious, as it relates to team coaching and your perspective and what you're seeing, What do you
Mhm.
think about what I've just shared, and maybe offer some insights around it?
First of all, I have to say I'm very fascinated by what you're investigating. And if I can maybe put it in terms of how I understand it, we have always said that emotional intelligence is the science behind leadership.
Mm,
So it's all about, awareness, it's about self-regulation, social awareness, and relationship management. In the work that I'm doing a lot, especially in coaching, I'm finding that, being centered, being grounded in self, knowing all those parts of you, you
mm,
know, really helps in the way we all show up because, a team, again, it is just a synergy of so many different energies coming into it. So the more individuals can lead self, the more they can be more centered, the more they are more grounded, how they show up in humility, how they can self-regulate their own emotions and lean in with genuine humility and curiosity,
mm,
there's a chance of being able to move things forward faster than when we don't have that awareness. And as you're saying, emotional regulation.
mm,
Because again, there's so many trigger points today, so many things to trigger people, whether it's what they're watching in the news, the change that
mhm,
is happening, the challenges with having even enough staff to work. There's just so many challenges. So
mm.
the reason why each individual really needs to be grounded um, as they enter in these spaces.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing that you referred to at the beginning of when you started talking about accepting and noticing all the different parts of myself.
Yes.
And if I'm really honest, there's probably some parts that I don't always want to look at,
Yeah.
or that I don't, especially when I'm reactive or I'm triggered, as you mentioned, or I've stuck. And in
Yeah.
healthcare today, we
Yeah.
have so many different activators and stressors, but then in normal life, when you leave your job, you also have lots of stressors too. And
Yeah.
so how do we create environments where the relational equity can be developed and people can feel safe enough to maybe even share those areas that are not the typically, the places we want to go all the time, but are necessary to have
Yeah.
deeper relationship and more relational equity on our teams?
Oh, I love the ones you're using, Trace. Wow. I honestly don't know if I'm going to be responding directly to that question, but I'll go to a framework that I love in healthcare. It's called the LEADS framework.
Mm,
And the one that we always start as a foundation is the lead self. And the thesis of this is you cannot ask others to trust yourself when you cannot even trust you.
mm,
So to what extent do you trust you? Right? And the process of trusting you is a lifelong process, right? Is a lifelong process of knowing all parts of you. And everyone is on a journey. So how can we create an environment where we can normalize that we're human beings, not human doings.
mm,
We are human beings and give each other grace and create an environment where people are not in a Magdala hijack all the time, scared, frightened. So many
mhm,
people are living in fear, and that is not a condition even for them to flourish.
mhm,
So for me, the simple answer is we acknowledge ourselves. We are all human beings in process. We become vulnerable, acknowledge that my vulnerability doesn't define me.
mm,
If anything, it makes me stronger. And the growth mindset is maybe I don't know that, but I can learn, right? So trusting myself enough to know that my vulnerabilities really don't define me. They are growing edges
mhm.
for that. And leaders do set the tone, but I think all the other team members as well do create and sustain, the tone that could be set, for those conditions to thrive.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I agree. Leaders set the tone. What's the tone we're setting is the real question. And if I'm
Mm,
willing to, so I think most leaders can relate to the idea of having some imposter syndrome at some point, and having, not a lot of trust in ourselves at different times when uncertainty is really high or complexity is really high. Because if you get real honest about it, you don't have the answer about what you're supposed to or should do in a given
yeah,
situation, because
yeah,
that this moment there's nothing that you can do that's going to change the large complex problems that are going on. Okay, just a quick pause to today's podcast. Are you having a challenge as a clinical leader with one or more individuals who you find activate you on your team? Or maybe you're noticing that oftentimes you want to be able to communicate with people, but in the heat of the moment, it's difficult for you because you're having a difficult time regulating yourself. Well, I totally understand this. This has been some of the biggest challenges in my life as a leader and as a human being. And so I created a free resource for clinical leaders, nurse educators, and healthcare executives called the Relationship Regulator. It's a mini course that will show you step by step a framework that may serve you very powerfully in this area. So if you want to download the Relationship Regulator for free, click in the show notes and you'll find that resource for you today. Now, back to the show. So there is a sense of distrust of your even ability to decide to do something. And I wonder what would happen if more leaders shared on that level and made that sort of conversation an operational priority. What would happen, do you think? And have you seen that kind of a safe space where leaders are willing to share at that level? And what has happened as you've observed that?
I would say that I have been actually observed a few leaders who are extremely vulnerable and who are extremely dynamic and transformational.
Mm,
I think if the leader knows themselves that they are not just having to feed the wolves, so to speak, but they have that implicit trust that people will respond. I believe people do respond to authenticity. Authenticity connects with people.
mm,
You know, the bravado doesn't. I think if people are genuinely authentic and can say, hey, this is an area I don't know about. And again, the literature on leadership is saying in this complex environments, nobody has all the answers.
mm,
Nobody has all the answers. So we need to create an environment where we can invite other people to share. And when they share, can we actually follow through with that? Other than just, doing it in a performative way. So yes, Trace, I've seen and have had the privilege of working with leaders who are vulnerable in ways that resonate with the group, and they really help the people connect with them as human beings. And I've seen even the leaders who have led in this way, that have been a part of their team, are more motivated to help them,
mm,
right? So it almost becomes like that genuine human. We're here, we're trying to do work, but we all recognize that, there's some issues, that
mm.
we might not know everything, that we are being invited to the table. And when we're talking about a sense of belonging, yes, you feel you belong when your ideas are actually being, you know, invited and leveraged.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that this is a huge solution. I think for the switch from command and control hierarchical leadership to a shared, more distributed leadership model where we are actually sharing leadership in a real fundamental way. But that
Yes.
also, let's not be like, we got to be honest about the fact that that's actually going to ask leaders who are more comfortable in a command and control setting to
Yeah.
let go and go through the fear of what that means for them to
Yeah.
let go and to
Yeah.
share in a vulnerable way. I think what you're talking about, you mentioned it, it's about being a human being first and foremost,
Yeah.
and recognizing I might have a role on this team that is the leader, but we are all leading together. And
Yeah.
I'm a human with you, and we have got to figure this out together. There's no way that I can do this by myself.
Yes.
When you look at leaders that are struggling to have that kind of vulnerability, what are some suggestions you have for them that would help them to kind of break through that initial inertia?
Oh, but boy, most leaders are now transitioning from that command and control culture to a more, egalitarian culture, collective, thinking about distributed leadership. And those are mindsets. I think coaching is what really helps the leaders be able to confront that in a safe space
Mm-hmm.
and talk about that. So the leaders that I coach that are in a culture that is telling them, okay, you need to behave as a host, not as a hero. And yet this culture is still steeped in it. The processes are still very hierarchical, command and control. So it's the culture that the organizations are still in that is creating challenges for individuals to shift.
Right.
Because
Right.
if their personal development or in their other place where they really want to do this, when it comes down to it, everything is being judged through the command and control lens.
It
So people are
is.
all over the map with us, all over the map.
Well, and
Yeah.
I think the complaint that I get from a lot of leaders that are struggling to make that transition
Yeah.
is that the operational demands and constraints are so high. How can I possibly carve out time? I don't have time to breathe, let alone, spend time being vulnerable with my team. And this is what honestly is being thought about from a lot of managers, leaders, even executives that I speak with at different times. So yes is the answer to what you're sharing. Like developing relationship with my team is the most important thing. In fact, it might be the one retention activity that will actually make a difference, developing strong relationships. But with that operational, barrage, that waterfall of stuff that
Mhm.
has to get done, how do we practically carve that time out? What would you suggest to a leader that's struggling in healthcare today with that?
Those struggles are very real. And especially in a place where, life and death situations have to be handled. So I do have lots of empathy, especially for leaders in those kinds of environments.
Mm-hmm.
However, I do encourage them to take an inventory of the time that they have. How are they spending the time that they have? So it's, we all have 24 hours. When I read Covey's thing is that we all have 24 hours. So first things first.
Mm-hmm.
So going to the same old tested matrix, are you doing the most important or are you just you're responding to the tyranny of the urgent? There's
Right.
some things that don't seem important, especially building the team and helping them shoulder that burden. It is important work. It's not urgent work, but it's important work. So
Mm-hmm.
it comes down to a leader, how they are managing themselves and the perspective that they bring to their work. And
Mm-hmm.
again, even a 5-minute conversation trace
Mm.
can be transformative. We don't need an hour.
No.
It's how I show up, right? And it's how you show up, how you engage with people, even for 10 minutes in a very focused, present way, and
Mm-hmm.
trying to get to the root cause. What is it that is holding you back? Let's ask more questions than just, you know, um, yeah, dispense answers and commands. I
Right.
think it's all about it starts there.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I have conversations with leaders about is the idea that so what if you could have back all of the time that
Mhm.
you are spending right now in any conflict, any union grievance,
Yeah.
any kind of HR investigation? What if you could have even 50% of that time per year
Mhm.
back into your capacity? What would that be
Wow.
like for you? Because that's the corollary for me. It's like if you actually spend time doing this, at first it's not going to be easy. Let's be honest about that.
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
the ROI on that, the return on that invested time over the course of a year or even 90 days
Yes.
will start to get you a different kind of dynamic with your team and with those people that are sort of the problem people.
Yes.
There will be a shift, and I've seen it over
Yeah.
and over again. So I love what you're sharing there, because the assessment of your time, how much of that time are you spending in investigation and stuff that drains you, or micromanagement or performance
Yeah.
management that's unnecessary because it's a reflection of the lack of relationship that's
Yes.
there on the team for you. And
100.
I just want to also share with the listeners too that that was me as an executive leader for many years. I got lots of results. I was very directive, and I was not what you would call a high EQ leader. I was the opposite of that, and then as a result, I suffered, and the
Yes.
people around me suffered. And I had really great results on paper, but
Yeah.
what I didn't have was the relational equity that would
Yeah.
fill my heart and my soul and my gut with
Yeah.
that joy that I wanted to feel. So, and I also spent a lot of time in micromanaging things that I did not like and that were really draining, and
Yes.
noticed the shift for me. So just want to put that out there too, to be totally transparent with that for people that are
Yeah.
listening and going, that's pie in the sky. So yeah, I love what you're sharing, Betty. Thank you for bringing it. What are you working on right now that's bringing you joy and excitement, that you're really noticing? Wow, this is filling my cup.
This month I've had a couple of projects that are coming to an end, which I'm very excited about. The first one is we worked with an organization to create a leadership framework that would really bring distributed leadership to life.
Mm,
We are talking about, creating space for everybody to be a leader, assuming everybody has that leadership potential. It's about, inspiring them to truly make that change. So creating a framework that would actually enable distributed leadership to work, not to be an idea out there, but
mm,
to work. It's something that I'm very excited about. And I'm looking forward to seeing how this organization that was extremely, passionate about doing that is going to affect it. And I've been doing some leadership development work with their leaders as well
mhm,
to activate that culture. The other project that I'm excited about, as you know, I'm a leadership faculty of Canadian College for Health Leaders. I've been helping revamp the curriculum of Leads Leadership Foundation course that is offered to healthcare leaders across the country.
mhm.
And it is one of the courses that each healthcare leader has to take to get the Canadian Health Executive designation. So
Wow.
creating the curriculum, and as you know, I've been a long-term student of the LEADS framework. I was one of the early adopters when it was being launched back in, I believe, 2006 there. So I've been an early adopter, and I really love that framework. And creating a curriculum for these health leaders has been a really passion project for the last 2 weeks.
Mm,
And we are going to be launching it in January 2025, and it will also be offered in French. So
mm,
again, for me, leadership development is my life's passion, and
mhm,
I love creating programs and facilitating and seeing the transformation that comes when you bring together people. So much is not about the reading; it's about when you bring diverse leaders together, when they're learning together, when they're reflecting. We definitely bring lots of reflective space into this learning opportunity. It's very hands-on experiential so that people are not just walking out with book knowledge, but they're having real insights that are going to change how they lead. It's
mm,
always a joy because of the ripple effect that I can see how they're going to impact their team, and then how their team is going to really be more, again, aligned with the stakeholders, the clients, the patients they serve.
mm.
So it's a project that I take to heart because of the wide impact and influence it has on the Canadian healthcare sector.
Yeah, it's amazing work, Betty.
Yeah,
Thank you for doing that work.
yeah.
I'm curious about it. Can you share just a little bit about your framework for shared leadership that
Mm.
you've created, and just share a couple of snippets from it, because that to me sounds very interesting. I'd like to know a little bit more.
Well, I'll share my own, I would talk about this, but I will share, a model that I use always for personal and organizational change. And I like simple frameworks because I think in our complex world, we don't have time to, remember 7 steps to anything.
Hmm.
And even those steps have to be screened through the lens of wisdom
Hmm.
and context and individual, right? Preferences. So my model is called the 3A framework, or triple A framework for personal change and organizational change. And the first A starts with awareness. What
Hmm.
is the awareness of you, the situation, the context? How aware are you? Because again, sometimes we move from problem to solution before we have investigated the ecosystem of the problem.
Hmm.
And then that is really employing our systems thinking skills to be very creative, to apply critical thinking and systemic thinking so that we are not creating other problems unintentionally. And that level of awareness can be gained by being very reflective, by being very mindful. I think leaders have to create time to think, create time to really reflect,
Right.
and also conversations where they're asking more questions and not assuming. Once I've,
Hmm.
as a senior leader, sometimes I thought I knew before, a staff member tells me what's going on. I've already made my conclusion. So the rest of the time, I'm pretend listening because I already know, right? And that is the Achilles heel of leadership. Because yes, you may know, you have experience, you know the team, you know the players, but how can you suspend that judgment? and just
Mm.
really investigate and be curious and understand what the underlying cause is. And then the next
Mm-hmm.
phase, alignment. I do believe as leaders, as organizations, we all have to align to a core set of principles. Otherwise, we'll be all over the map. So what is your guiding vision? What are
Mm-hmm.
your guiding values? How can you do the three horizon thinking in terms of looking ahead, thinking back and looking inside out so that you
Mm-hmm.
can bring all those perspectives. And I call that process a process of discernment than thinking, because thinking could be very rational based on your right brain hemisphere, but discernment really brings the two parts of the brain. It does bring the time horizon so that you can be wise, make wise decisions. And then from there, you can activate. That's the last A. You can move into activation by considering, all the critical factors and, do something, whatever action it is. I think that we have to keep the flywheel effect moving by action and iterating instead of waiting for the perfect plan. So
Mm-hmm.
that is the one that if it's shared amongst everyone, if everyone can be aligned towards the same strategic goals. I talked about the leads framework. What is our leadership competency? What are the leadership behaviors we are all trying to align to? And then everyone really takes on the mantle of leadership, because sometimes if
Mm-hmm.
people don't believe they're leaders or they can make a difference, they stand back. But then
Right.
how do we create organizations where everyone feel and practice their leadership? Because truly leadership is not a position, it is a choice.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that framework. So, how can people get in touch with you? What's the best way for people to reach out and get connected to you and your work?
People can get connected with me through my website, bmcoachingconsulting.ca. They can connect with me as well through my LinkedIn page, Betty Mutwiri. And I hope that you can have those coordinates. Yeah, so those are the two great ways that people can connect with me. I always say once you read up on me, then you can see if I'm for you. Because again, I'm not for everyone. I have a very specific way in terms of, I mean, you connect with people who truly want to get things moving. I want to
Mm-hmm.
work with anyone who is stuck,
Mm-hmm.
especially in this complex world. And that is the client that I love. Whatever is getting you stuck, whatever is holding you back, and especially even on a personal level, what are some of those personal beliefs? What are some of the mental saboteurs? I love working with saboteurs as well, because you did say that sometimes we are our own worst enemy. I do bring the knowledge of identifying your own saboteurs so that we can be able to work with them in a productive way. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm about truly unleashing people's potential, because I do believe leadership resides in every one of us, and there's huge
Mm-hmm.
potential in all of us.
Wow. Amazing. Thank you, Betty, so much for being with us. And I'll look forward to watching the work that you're doing in the world.
Thank you so much, Chris, for having me. This was delightful.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for listening to the show today. If you got value from today's show, would you mind doing me a favor and leaving a review, a rating, and just a positive comment on the platform that you're listening on? The reason this is important is because as we amplify the show's presence and what it's creating as value for people like you that are listening, clinical leaders, managers, and executives, it will help us to include more people in this platform, to invite more guests, thought leaders, and different people that will help us to amplify a systemic change in healthcare today. Now, I appreciate you. I'm grateful for you listening today. And I hope that as you leave here, that you'll remember to be a safe space. Thank you again for getting to the end of this podcast. And if you enjoyed this and you found that there was value in it for you, my invitation is for you to subscribe for future episodes that come out weekly on Tuesdays. Thank you again, and I'm looking forward to being with you next time. Now remember to be a safe space.